In this episode, we are going to assemble the interior front pocket. The lining for this pocket is slightly thicker than I normally like at 0.8 millimeters. So I've opted for this 3-piece lining approach to the front pocket. To get started, we're going to do the skiving on all the lining pieces. I like using my basting tape to hold down the pieces whenever I'm skiving. It frees up both hands so that I don't have to hold with one hand and then try to skive with the other. This is a 6 millimeter skive right out to 0. My technique for skiving out to 0 is to start my first pass with a shallow angle and then come back and increase that angle to get that edge right out to 0. This helps prevent skiving too deep and taking out that nice clean edge, which in this case we want to leave intact. If we're doing this on a piece that has some trim allowance, it's not critical if we go below 0, but in this case we want to make sure we're working nice and accurately. One thing I mentioned in the last episode is that I really like this specific basting tape because it isn't actually that sticky, so it means it doesn't leave any residue and it's easy to peel off the pieces in this application. The only downside being that I can usually only re-stick a piece twice before the tape no longer holds. So then I have to peel it off, add a new piece. But this basting tape is really affordable, so going through it isn't that big a deal. You can skive all 4 sides of the narrow pieces if you want a nice thin edge when the pocket is assembled. And just like we did on the side gussets, you can go ahead and use the template to mark out the stitch spacing or use your own guides. You can then go ahead and add glue to all of the lining pieces and the main pocket panel. I added those lines to the back of the main panel so that I can line up my center lining piece accurately. I also don't have a trim allowance on these lining pieces. I've now added that to the plans, so your pieces will have trim allowance, whereas mine don't. And it was at this exact moment that I realized I had forgotten to add the trim allowance to the plans. But as you can see, it's not that big a deal if you don't have it. Just line it up and everything goes together just fine. Even with the roller, I like going to my edges to make sure that they're nice and secured in place. Sometimes the roller misses the very edge, so just good to double check. Wherever there's a start and stop point of the stitch, I use my round dent iron. I find this results in a cleaner end point versus using the French irons. You can also stitch straight across this entire top section. You will be left with a stitch that runs across the fold in those side pieces, so I prefer to do the top run in 3 different sections. And now I just go through and punch all the stitch holes. As I punch the lines that border the folded section, you're going to see why I did the lining in the 3 pieces. Where there isn't lining, it's much thinner, so it folds really nice and clean. So if you're to do the lining in one piece, then you're going to want a lining that's maybe 0.5, maybe less, so that it's a lot thinner and that section folds easily. And the little bit of trim allowance that I did manage to add to my pieces, I'm trimming off now. Yours should have trim allowance all along the top, the sides, and the bottom. And then a little bit of light sanding preps the edge for paint. Before we can do our edge paint though, we need to add our crease lines. So I've got a piece of leather here, and on the flesh side is some black jeweler's rouge, which works really well to clean up any dried or burnt edge paint on the end of your creasing tips. Edge creasing this Allowance Sully in jade is a pretty delicate color. My edge creasing machine is set to maybe 2.5. I'm not sure what actual temperature that is. Normally on any other leather that I've edge creased, I haven't set it to below 3. So I find this specific color is very prone to melting or burning. So be aware of that. Do a lot of testing before you go and edge crease your final piece. So in some cases, I don't want to see a back stitch. So here's, in this case, how I'm going to hide the end of that thread. When I get to the end of the run, I'll put the 2 threads on the back, tie a knot, cut off the needles, and then I'm going to glue that thread, in this case, into the crease so that it is completely hidden and nothing will ever come undone. Another method to hide any back stitching is to open up your lining when you get to the very last hole, and then feed the 2 needles through that last hole and do the same thing. Tie a knot, snip those threads super close so that they're in between the lining and the main piece, and then glue it back together. And for our middle piece, you can add just a bit of glue to the inside crease, add a bit of glue to your thread, and then we will fold this together. Use our pliers to give it a nice crease, and those threads will be hidden. To make sure these threads sit nice and flat, I use my awl as almost a pivot point to make sure those threads are stacked side by side, nice and neat, right down the center of that fold. And to trim those threads, I'll pick up the thread to the point where it's nice and stuck down and trim it off right at that point. That way it ensures it's going to lie nice and flat and it's stuck down nice and secure. And to hold everything in place while this glue sets on this folded piece, I will use these locating pins, which are really handy and basically act like mini clamps that go through the stitching holes. Once those are all pressed into place, you can go ahead and stitch those two folded edges. Nothing fancy here, just back stitching. In this case, I'm going to show the back stitching because I don't have an effective way to hide it. So back stitch the front, the back, press down those threads, and we are ready for edge paint. So you're going to edge paint the two sides, the top and the bottom. Process is exactly the same. Add one nice base layer, sand it down, add another layer, sand it down. Hopefully by the third layer, that should be your last step. And then you can polish and add some Columbus wax if you choose. So the last step in this pocket is just adding that crease to the side pieces so that it sets nice and cleanly once we stitch it to our interior lining. In the next episode, we will be going over the full construction of the front panel, including the assembly of the front pocket onto the liner. If you haven't already, head over to my website, norfolkhandmade.com, to get the plans for this project. Thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you in the next one.